family violence, domestic violence, and trauma-informed care track. Please welcome our presenters. First is Honorable Judge Rosie Speedling Gonzalez. She presides over County Court Law number 13. She was elected to the bench on November the 6th, 2018. At the time of her election, she became the first openly gay judge to be elected in Bexar County. In 1987, Judge Gonzalez earned a bachelor's degree in political science and government from St. Mary's University. She spent the next several years working as a probation officer. In 2001, she completed her JD at St. Mary's University School of Law. She obtained her certification as a child welfare specialist by the National Association of Counsel for Children. After graduating from law school, Judge Gonzalez entered into private practice where she represented children in foster care or the Child Protective Services System. She has served on the Bexar County Small Minority and Women Business Enterprise Advisory Committee, and during her tenure there, has helped ensure that LGBT firms would be included in the county's contracting policies and procedures. Next, we have Dr. Speedling. She is a licensed professional, licensed chemical dependency counselor, and a nationally credentialed counselor. She has a doctorate degree in counselor education and supervision and is a visiting professor at the University of Texas, San Antonio. Dr. Speedling has worked in the field of addiction and mental health for over 10 years and has presented at several national and state level conferences and published several manuscripts on various topics pertaining to mental health. Now we have Dolores Villanueva. She is a licensed professional counselor and licensed chemical dependency counselor. She's a graduate from Our Lady of Our Lake University, obtaining her undergraduate degree in 2004 and her graduate degree in 2007. She has provided counseling services for individuals and families, along with facilitating access to recovery adult groups at the Jewish Family and Children's Services in El Paso. Ms. Villanueva has worked at the Center for Healthcare Services as a clinical practitioner and at the Avalon Social Service as a child therapist. Since 2015, Ms. Villanueva has provided counseling services for people affected by domestic violence through the Victims Empowerment Counseling Program at the Bexar County Family Justice Center. And then we have Lisa Galarza. She is a licensed clinical social worker and has obtained her bachelor's in social work in 2002 and her master's in social work in 2003 from Our Lady of the Lake University. She has 8 years experience in working with the homeless population. In 2004, she worked for SAM Ministries, where she held positions as a case manager, manager of social service, the SAM's Ministry Emergency Shelter, the Blanco Transitional Center, and she managed the Housing First program. She also worked for Haven for Hope as a family case manager. In 2012, she transitioned into working with Bexar County Family Justice Center as a community resource manager, where she has been for the past 8 years. In January 2019, Ms. Galarza received her clinical license. Thank you, presenters, and it's all yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Dr. Stacy Speedling Gonzalez. I'm first presenter, and I want to thank you all for the invitation and the opportunity to present with such wonderful, talented people. I'm going to share my screen because it is much more effective if I have control over the PowerPoint. So I'm going to lead the presentation by discussing the process of treating trauma using trauma-informed care with persons involved with domestic violence. Notice that I use the term persons involved with domestic violence because we're not just talking about victims. We are talking about other individuals that are involved in cases where domestic violence or family violence occurs. So I will tell you that I have presented on trauma-informed care many, many times since the etiology and genesis of trauma-informed services. I will tell you that in the short time that I have you, that is not an adequate time for me to present a robust body of knowledge about what this really entails. So what you will get from me, and then I will move on to my other great presenters, is sort of a snapshot, a foundation of what trauma-informed care is and how we can tie this into our work with individuals involved in family or domestic violence. So I start with trauma-informed care, but prior to getting into that process, I want to talk about trauma itself. Obviously, I will talk a little bit about diagnostic. I will talk a little bit about clinical work, and hopefully tie this into our legal professionals on this particular Zoom. So when we talk about trauma, we know that it has a deep impact. And when I say trauma, please understand that family violence is traumatic. Witnessing family violence for children is traumatic. Anyone involved in this situation is going through a tremendous degree of trauma. And in San Antonio, particularly, family violence is just like wildfire. It's tremendous. The reality is in San Antonio, people are safer on the streets than they are in their homes because there is generational impact of family violence. People come from homes where they grow up and there's violence, they witness violence, they end up in domestic violence in their intimate partner relationships. And as a result, what we see are individuals here who have very profound impacts as a result of trauma. And I'll tie this into how individuals end up in our legal system, how they end up in some of our healthcare systems. All of that goes hand in hand according to our literature. So as you can see here, trauma is directly related to all of these things. People who experience family violence, witness family violence, grow up in a home where there's family violence are going to grow up not only with mental illness symptomology, but also physical health symptomology. And that ties me into the ACEs study. For anyone who is not familiar with the ACEs study, it was a study conducted by Kaiser Permanente in 2015, and it actually was a study looking at morbid obesity. And they had a particular patient enrolled in that study who lost a tremendous amount of weight, went from morbid obesity to a normal BMI. And after about 3 months, she ended up gaining all of her weight back, over 130 pounds and then some. And as they started looking at and trying to explore in this research study what had led to her weight gain and why she put on not only all the weight in such a short time, but extra weight, what they found out is that she had an individual who had shown romantic interest in her, and it just made her feel so insecure. She gained all her weight back, and they discovered that she had sexual abuse history, and that propelled into what we now know today as the ACEs study. The term ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So these are individuals who will grow up in a home where there's domestic violence. These are individuals who will grow up in neighborhoods that are prevalent for community violence. And as a result of witnessing or experiencing adverse child experiences such as abuse, whether sexual, physical, the witnessing of family violence, again, I mentioned the community violence, having a parent that's incarcerated, all of those things become our ACEs. And as a result of growing up in a home where there are ACEs, individuals will have poor concentration in school. These are our kiddos who are diagnosed with IDD sometimes diagnosed with comprehensive disorders such as ADHD, dyslexia. So you got a kid in school that can't concentrate because they're scared. They're growing up in an unhealthy environment. And because they are scared, their brain cannot concentrate on school. So they get diagnosed with all kinds of things. And those same kiddos, as we know, eventually will develop some social and emotional and cognitive issues. They start behaving badly. They start running away. They get involved in drugs and alcohol, early pregnancies. Those are those adoptions of health risk behaviors. Drugs and alcohol, get involved in their own violent relationships. And then the result of that is disease, disability, and social problems. So when we look at the ACEs study, there are 10 questions. They are binary, yes or no. And according to the ACEs study, individuals who have 6 or more ACEs will actually die approximately 25 years before their expected lifespan. And I tell you this to say that trauma itself is now known by the National Institute of Health as the #1 public health crisis. So when we think about family violence, when we think about really a lot of our defendants or a lot of our pretrial defendants, our whoever you want to call them, I don't know all your terminology, but when we think of the people that we serve, it really all goes back to trauma. And the thing that I want to tell you, especially for my clinicians in the room, when we talk about the diagnostic criteria of trauma, when we talk about how we actually diagnose trauma, Trauma oftentimes is misdiagnosed for other more severe and pronounced mental health disorders. So I see clients in my practice, and it's not uncommon for them to be diagnosed with major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, even schizoaffective disorder, because people with traumatic experiences become hypervigilant. And because of that hypervigilance, they may feel like people are out to get them or hurt them. I wonder why, especially if they've grown up in violence or if they've been in a domestic violence relationship. Of course, they feel paranoid in public, especially if they just left the perpetrator or the person who uses violence against them. So when they come to a clinician and they say, I think people are out to get me, I don't feel safe in public, we think they're psychotic. So there's a lot of overgeneralization and misdiagnosis when it comes to trauma, which means we have individuals that might meet criteria for other chronic mental health disorders, be prescribed medication and treated as if they have those chronic mental health disorders. But we've never really addressed that number one issue that occurred in the beginning, which is the violence, which is the trauma, which is this very persistent communal and public health situation that is pervasive in San Antonio. So sometimes people ask me, well, what if I have someone who never gets involved in drugs and alcohol, never gets involved in these risky behaviors? Let's just say they bypass some of the fractions of this pyramid. Would they still die early? The answer is yes, because we are also seeing individuals who witness family violence, grow up in a violent home, have a parent incarcerated, experience trauma in an early developmental milestone age, who are now meeting criteria for severe autoimmune disorders and other chronic health disorders because, to quote Bessel van der Kolk, the body keeps the score. If you are not treating your trauma, it's going to have to manifest somewhere. And oftentimes it manifests itself in behavioral issues and in our physical health issues. So naturally, if you are incarcerated by the age of 18, or if you are a product of the system because you have this traumatic brain that's never been treated, it's not surprising that you have economic problems. It's not surprising that you have a pronounced substance problem. It's not surprising that the only way you can sleep is if you drink a fifth. So naturally, people who have traumatic experiences are going to show up in our clinical services, but they don't show up typically seeking trauma services. No, they end up in our Bexar County Jail. And as you see here, 80% of female offenders with mental illness have had a physical or sexual abuse history. 75% of women and men who receive substance abuse treatment report trauma history. So now they're being treated for addiction. Children with disabilities are more likely to experience neglect compared to non-disabled children. So you have a kiddo that already has developmental delays and they are in a home that's not safe for them. And so you can read these statistics. And I put these statistics up here for a reason. And I have 3 slides of statistics that I will not read to you. What I will tell you is that prior to trauma-informed care and trauma-informed services, we failed to recognize the impact of trauma. We failed to recognize the fact that a majority of individuals who are coming in for what we would deem back then as non-trauma related issues, these are legal problems. Substance use is illegal. Battery is illegal. We never looked at the source. We talked about the branches of the tree and we never got down to the root. But now with trauma-informed care and trauma-informed services, we're starting to shift the focus. We're starting to move away from this concept of what is wrong with you. And we're now saying what happened to you. And why that's relevant is because when we start to treat the problem, we can start seeing reduction in recidivism. We see individuals who are reducing the substance use, and substance use is highly correlated with family violence. I don't know how many times I've heard cases, especially in my practice, where I see clients with substance use disorders, where they have an adult child who has a mental health issue or a substance use disorder, who's 25 years old, living at home. Mom cannot handle the fact that they're stealing money out of her purse, and she confronts the adult child, and the adult child swings on her. And now we have a record, and now we have someone who's involved in the court system, and the families are bewildered and beside themselves because they're expecting the court system to help intervene. Well, we've already heard about some of the disparities with respect to our health system, our legal system, and how it comes to the ability to address mental health. Yes, mental health is complicated. It's complicated for clinicians. And speaking about that complication, when we talk about this concept of diagnosing trauma, our DSM is as accurate as the person who is holding the document and as accurate as the person who is willing to disclose their trauma history. So how often do you think people end up in a clinician's office and we ask them about their trauma history and they tell us there is none? But yet look at these stats. Look at how many people it says end up in these situations, end up in these agencies, end up in these courthouses, and they have trauma history. But even if we are asking those questions, we may not be getting the accurate answer because they can only answer as much as they trust us. And let's be realistic. How much do they trust us? Just the fact that we have a badge, do you think that makes us trustworthy? Just the fact that I work at the courthouse, I have letters behind my name doesn't make me trustworthy. In fact, a majority of clients that I work with who experience trauma don't know they experience trauma. So our DSM-5 is, well, it's all we have and it's flawed. It's not a diagnostic instrument, really. A diagnostic instrument is an X-ray machine. That's when you can put your arm behind an X-ray and you can see a break. The DSM is a field manual. It gives you a set of criteria and you ask a series of questions. And if that person answers the questions accurately, then you look at the criteria and you see if it fits. So obviously there's some gaps in this, but it's all we have. We do the best we can. So it's important. Why am I telling you all this? It's important that we operate from a lens that allows us to be more trustworthy to the people that we serve, that allows them the capability, hopefully, to fully disclose their trauma, to be able to provide that information to us so we can start looking at interventions that will assist this individual and hopefully reduce the likelihood of return. So, as you can see here by the quote, trauma survivors are at the much higher risk of co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders, violence, victimization, and perpetration. So they are either going to commit violence or they are going to be on the other end of it. Self-injury and a host of other coping mechanisms, which are devastating, not just to our community, but to our homes, our families, and even people we love. So why trauma-informed care? It is a lens. From a theoretical framework perspective, it is a lens. It is a way by which you can look at people that you are working with. The best way that I can say it is treat them all as if they have trauma, because whether they disclose it or not, let's just assume they do. The fact that they've ended up in your system, well, we saw the stats. So chances are you probably have someone in front of you who has adverse childhood experiences, whether they decide to tell you that or not. You want to definitely operate from a perspective of this person may have trauma. So we use trauma-informed care to, number one, avoid re-victimization. And I don't have time in this particular topic to talk about institutionalized re-traumatization. It is real. The fact is they don't see our institutions as a supportive feature. I mean, let's be honest, when you use drugs and your kids get taken away, they don't see us in a positive light. They see us as adversarial. So we have to really work hard to ensure that we can work with the individual, because they will just withhold. And if they are not willing to cooperate, then we really have nothing, do we? So we shouldn't be adversarial. We definitely want to understand that their behavior is absolutely an attempt to cope. These are survival techniques. When we talk about hypervigilance, the reality is people who are hypervigilant do not plan to be hypervigilant. That's why anger management is not effective. To quote a client, they said it best: anger management is effective unless you're really angry. The reality is, if you come from a home where people were violent and you have someone in front of you that starts talking loud, you will hit first and you will calm down later, because that's how trauma works. It's called a fight response. We also want to provide some sort of agency when it comes to choices. People should be able to make choices. Whether you're working with them as their attorney, whatever your role is in their life, they have choices. Now, yes, we have to allow them to be informed consumers. These are the choices, these are the risks associated with those choices. But at the end of the day, we have to treat the individual as if they have some agency or control over their life, because a majority of situations, they haven't had that. We want to be culturally competent, and we want to understand the individual within the context of their life experiences and cultural background. So these are the core principles of trauma-informed care or trauma-informed services: safety, trustworthiness, and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and finally, cultural, historical, and gender issues. So when I do evaluations, this is the one that seems to fall short the most. There is obviously a lot of federal dollars that come through the pipeline all the time for all kinds of services, whether in the legal or the clinical world. And if you say that you're operating from a trauma-informed care perspective, you can get that money. But here's the thing, they also require evaluations. And when I conduct these evaluations on different agencies who have received federal funding, what I see is this one falls short the most. And the place that it falls short the most is where it says throughout the organization, staff and people they serve are provided a feeling of being physically and psychologically safe. I find a lot of agencies are really good at that with their clients. They're horrible when it comes to their own staff. If your staff who are now working in a pandemic, who have been subjected to everybody's trauma, if they are so burned out to the point of impairment, if they're experiencing compassion fatigue to a level where they no longer want to come to work, they're missing days, they're sick, they're giving up excuses, or even worse, people are quitting on you, you cannot say you're trauma-informed. Trustworthiness and transparency. What that means is that information is dictated to a person prior to. So if there is a consequence that's going to result from not following the drug court protocols, the participants need to know that in advance. They don't need to be surprised. That's what increases that trustworthiness and transparency. It means that not only are the rules for defendants put on the wall, but the rules for the judge and the rules for the attorney are as well. It means that we are also saying, hold us accountable. We are not above any reproach here. And that's as simple as your consent forms, letting people know what they're getting involved in prior to getting involved with it. Taking the time with your clients to explain things in a way that is comprehensible to their level of understanding. Again, I'm moving quickly. I know that there may be a lot of questions and I can't see the chat box yet, but I'll definitely address some of those if you have them.
Right now, I have 2 minutes left to do my presentation, Dr. Speedling.
Not true. I am watching. I'm a college professor. I know what time it is. Peer support and mutual help. I'll let you read this. And obviously, people who have experienced these things when they are working with someone are going to be much more proficient in helping them. Collaboration and mutuality. I love the last line. One does not have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. This is really for anybody who's working with our clients, working with our defendants, making sure that you are working with them and not on them. Empowerment, voice, and choice. Again, people should be seen as the expert in their own lives. I know it's hard to believe that because look at where they are. They've ended up in a situation that was not favorable to them, but we also still need to not treat them as children. They need to be treated as adults and certainly given good information, taking the time that we need with them, and then being able to help them make the choice that's more suitable. Of course, we want to recognize past cultural stereotypes, biases, and become more culturally responsive to the needs of our clients. Understand that some things, especially when it pertains to family violence, have a historical, gender, and cultural issues involved in it. At this time, I'm going to stop my share, and I will allow the next presenter to take it away.
Good morning, everyone. This is Judge Rosie Speedling Gonzalez, and you have just heard from my wife, my partner, Dr. Stacy Speedling Gonzalez, and I'm getting a bunch of messages right now that explains everything, whatever that means. But I do learn a lot from her on a daily basis, and I preside over County Court at Law number 13, and County Court at Law number 13 is one of two legislatively designated courts. This is not something that I choose to do under 13, but I did choose to run for 13 so that knowing that this court presides over family violence cases at the misdemeanor level which means that the range of punishment is up to 1 year at the Bexar County Jail. The court could assess and impose up to $4,000 in fines. And for some of these offenses, you've got the list in front of you now. And for some of these offenses, the affirmative finding of family violence is issued. And that means that your right to bear firearms, to have guns, could be restricted, even taken from the defendant for the rest of their lives. So what do these cases look like? Well, they're assault bodily injury married, assault bodily injury to a family or household member, a terroristic threat to a family household member or paramour, interference with a 911 call, unlawful restraint, deadly conduct, violations of protective orders and bond conditions. And this court is also seeing more and more harassment that is linked to family violence. And we're seeing an uptick in resisting arrest and detention, in which the defendants are not cooperating with law enforcement at contact with their directives. So let's go to the next slide. And this court has jurisdiction over defendants that are 17 years or older that have been charged with a family violence offense committed within the geographic restrictions of Bexar County. And we've seen quite a number of 17-year-olds. They live in a twilight zone for purposes of receiving services. They're still considered children on the civil side for purposes of visitation. And some of them are frustrated because they want to come and tell the judge that you know, they should have a say in what happens to them in family law cases. But for criminal cases, they are considered adults and are oftentimes their first contact with criminal justice is at the Bexar County Jail as opposed to the juvenile court system. Now, out of all the cases that County Court at Law 13 sees processed in our offices, about 85% of them either on the police reports or somewhere in the life of that case, it's disclosed that the defendant has an issue with substance abuse. And that's important because, as you heard Dr. Speedling talk about trauma, we're discovering more and more as we work through participants in Reflejo Court, and I'm going to tell you about that in a little bit. About 95% of that 85% are adults with some history, if not a profound history, of childhood trauma or young adulthood trauma that has been left untreated. And that untreated trauma has led them to self-medicate. And that self-medication looks like substance abuse because that's what they are doing. Once the defendant is charged, they have a right to request that a bond be set. In our court, bonds are set with special conditions of bond given the nature of the allegations. Now, over COVID, and I anticipate this will change quickly as we got the news this morning that masks are no longer recommended by the CDC for indoor or outdoor activity. We will probably see an order from, you know, somewhere telling us that, especially the governor, that we are now back to normal or back to pre-COVID practices. But at this time, the governor has in his order barred any type of PR bonds for anyone with a history or who has been charged with the violent offense. Now, we strive every day, and it's a constant struggle because everyone has a role to play. But our main goal is to ensure that the accused, because they are not guilty until proven guilty, but that the accused has a right to due process and that process is protected. That if a complaining witness, not a victim, because again, defendants are innocent until proven guilty. We have complaining witnesses in County Court at Law 13 with safety concerns, and we want to make sure that if they have safety concerns, that we address them through whatever services are available to them through the criminal justice system. Someone mentioned, let's talk about the defendant's criminal history and how that is traumatizing. And we're going to get into that a little bit more as I go on with my slides. And you are right. There is some trauma associated with that history and with contact with the criminal justice system. For purposes of bond considerations, we have to consider that. Will they be compliant? Will they be coming to court? What is their income status? and things of that nature. If we go to the next slide, it's rudimentary, and it's so rudimentary that oftentimes attorneys forget to walk their clients through what is going to happen in this court when it comes to your domestic violence case. And so I developed a chart of the possible end results of cases that come into this court. It could be dismissed. It could be dismissed at any point. The defendant can decide to plead out, and a plea would look like supervision with many services in place. They can be supervised up to 2 years, possibly even more, depending on their cooperation with their court mandated and probation conditions. It could include no contact with the complaining witness or no harmful or and injurious contact with the complaining witness. They could be ordered, and in most cases nowadays, they're being ordered to complete the state sanctioned, state accredited batteries intervention prevention program. They could be ordered to complete stress management program, parenting classes like compadre y compadre. Maybe they'll be ordered to do the Motion Possible 360 program, which is a curriculum specifically developed for violent offenders with a history of substance abuse. Some of them come to us very young, or they never got their high school diploma or any type of GED certification. That could be ordered. They could be ordered to cooperate with the reentry center in helping themselves find employment that is suited to their skill set. Some of them come to us with questionable substance abuse histories. We said 85% of them, more or less, más o menos. And so they'll be ordered to do a TAP evaluation and follow recommendations. Oftentimes our defendants are ordered to make a $30 contribution to the Crime Stopper Fund. They're ordered to complete community service. They're afforded the opportunity to buy off community service if they want to make a donation to any nonprofit in Bexar County that runs a food pantry or a food bank. Sometimes they're also ordered to make a one-time $100 contribution to the Battered Women and Children Shelter. I often give them the opportunity to do AA, NA, or CA for community service, and they can do that if they so choose. Many times I'm asked to issue a zero tolerance order, so that often comes with motions to revoke. I allow defendants and their attorneys to request early termination of probation should they complete their conditions early, and we'll have a hearing on it, because many times the state will object to that, and we need to make a record of those concerns. Many times they are asked to pay restitution to whoever's they hurt or properties they damaged. This court will not order restitution if there is not an identified person who restitution is owed to, if there is not a set amount that they owe, and a drop dead date by which they need to pay it. Oftentimes cases will run concurrent with each other. The state oftentimes will take into consideration one case in exchange for a plea in another. Sometimes our misdemeanor sentences follow a felony agreement. Now, the other possible outcome would be that the case is taken to trial. It could be a bench trial. It could be a jury trial. It could be dismissed. They could be found guilty. It could be a mistrial. And our court team is comprised of our court coordinator, Sybil Obledo, our court reporter, Olga Gutierrez. We do have 2 clerks, Amanda and Anna. We have defense counsel as large as the bar. Probation officer, our court liaison officer is Marie Martinez. We do have a Reflejo Court case manager, Jackie Aguirre. We also work with the public defender's office and a multitude of providers in our community. Our next slide is going to talk more in depth as to Reflejo Court. Now, let me just be clear with you. We have one of the busiest courts in the county, if not the busiest courts. We had over 30 jury trials in 2019. We had just reached about 10 jury trials when COVID hit us in 2020. And through COVID, we had about 5 bench trials scheduled, and 2 of them actually went to verdict. Now, There's been some misinformation shared in social media regarding the status of Reflejo Court. Just to be clear, the court was created via a House Bill 3529. It was sponsored by, at the time, State Rep Roland Gutierrez, who is now State Rep Roland Gutierrez. It was also sponsored by Senator Jose Menendez, and Governor Abbott signed it into law in June of 2019. To date, we have been funded $193,000 and $800, not what you may have seen posted of close to $1 million. And if that happened, please tell me where that money is, because we are in dire need of funding. So if anybody knows where that rest of the money is, let us know where it is. And I'll do my best to get our funding sources to look at that. It was also posted that we only had 3 participants. That is a complete fabrication, and I don't know where that number came from. As of last week, we had 18 participants, and we are preparing 4 of them to graduate, and I believe we have 4 to 5 applicants waiting to be admitted into court. As of this morning, Reflejo Court had 1,950 cases pending. Now, as a result of House Bill 35, now I can't even think of the number, but the bill that made Reflejo Court into law, we were able to establish this court that works with first-time offenders of domestic violence who have some history of substance abuse. And should they be able to complete the program, then the case will be dismissed, it will be expungible, and the defendant will not be labeled a violent offender. I can tell you that I'm a very proud member of the Reflejo Court team. We have some very dedicated members of the team at every level, from public defenders to attorneys to service providers. There is a common thread among us, and we believe that redemption can be reached, and it can be reached by establishing programs and protocols that make defendants accountable. We all pretty much believe that redemption is a concept that assumes that we all make mistakes, and some of us even commit crimes. And for some of us, there are consequences. There could be punishment, criminal punishment. Some of us may need treatment. Some of the participants may need punishment and treatment. But what happens to the defendant once their debt to society has been paid? And so the question remains for all of us: should that defendant be afforded the ability to earn their way back and become equal partners in our community with the rest of us? You know, how do we define justice? A family violence conviction, we are very well aware of, stays with the defendant for the rest of their life. It limits their job opportunities. It limits, in many cases, relationship opportunities, parenting opportunities, educational opportunities, and the right to bear firearms, guns can be taken from them. And a conviction for family violence arguably creates a subclass of people that are relegated to the lowest rung of our societal caste system when we have it. And to say we don't would be to really fooling ourselves. And so do we want to be that society that relegates people to a part of our community that never has an opportunity to redeem themselves? We know that hurt people, but if we offer healing to the offender, we have an opportunity to heal our community by staving off scenarios in which untreated offenders continue to be addicts, continue to develop maladaptive behaviors, and continue to lash out. What does that mean? They continue to create more and more victims, when the fix could be to get to the root of the problem, and the root of the problem is the perpetrator behavior. So Reflejo Court addresses the behavior. We have the power within that court to heal one offender at a time and stop the creation of future victims for generations to come. So that is my presentation in a nutshell, and I will now pass it on to the 2 remaining presenters. Thank you very much, Jessica. Thank you very much, everyone who is in attendance. And I am open to questions, and I have made myself available, Jessica, to 12:15 today. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. And Dolores and Lisa, you all are up.
Hi, everybody. My name's Dolores. I'm with the Bexar County Family Justice Center. And I want to thank Dr. Speedling Gonzalez and Judge Gonzalez for the vital work they do in our community. We all want to help however we can. To begin services with the Bexar County Family Justice Center, you're going to want to reach out to our main number, which would be the 210-631-0100. Please contact us during business hours, and that would be to begin the process. So once you contact us, a crime victim liaison will be contacting you. And then from there, you'll begin the intake process. And during that intake process, they'll screen for safety. They may do some assessments based on danger or in the event that strangulation took place. And then from there, they'll inform the clients about our services. And then it would be up to the clients to be able to elect. And our services are available at any time so long as we offer them. And then we also have online applications through the Bexar County District Attorney's Office. So if you go to the website for Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzalez, there is an online application in both English and Spanish to apply for a protective order. And then from there, a crime victim liaison will be contacting you to begin that intake process. And then Lisa, you want to let them know about our services?
Yes. So for our services, we have the protective order unit there. That's mostly the main service that people go to our agency for. But we also have counseling, adult counseling through Dolores. We have child counseling through SAPD. SAPD is also there for making reports or filing charges or following up on those reports. They also help with the police reports to do crime victims compensation, and I'll go into that in a little bit. We also have TRALA, legal aid. So if they need assistance with divorce, child custody, child support, those kind of things, they're available. We do have individuals who work through Catholic Charities who take care of the kids on site, the grandmas and grandpas, to watch the kids while the individual is going and seeing our different partners so that they don't have to hear and be exposed to the information that is being shared. We also have our admin, and we do things like provide school supplies. We have a pantry where we provide some food, some clothing if available, some hygiene items, different things like that that our clients may need that are immediate needs at that moment. And then they get referred. Oh, we also have CPS connected to CPS. So if they have a CPS case, they're not there for reporting to CPS, but they're there if they are already involved with CPS and we need to follow up on it. Sometimes our clients have difficulty getting in contact with the individual who's in charge of their case or have questions. They're able to assist with that as well. So what I do, I am the clinical social worker at the Bexar County Family Justice Center, the community resource manager. So aside from getting services within our agency, I connect them to the outside community resources. So if they need employment, if they need childcare assistance through CCS or RCD Cares, if they need services for rent or utility assistance, whatever services our clients may need at that moment, I try to connect them to that. And I work with interns from various universities, so they're able to help and follow up on those services as well. The food bank, we work closely with a lot of different agencies just to make sure that not only do they get connected with the legal or law enforcement part, they also get connected within the community to help them be successful. Because domestic violence is not just about, making police reports or going through the legal system. It's also about helping that person become self-sufficient so that they can then be able to leave the individuals. We all know victims go back to the perpetrator several times before they finally actually leave. So we try to make sure that they get connected to those resources that they need, like employment or education and stuff like that, so that it makes it easier for them to be able to take those steps and leave the perpetrator. We also do group. Right now we're not doing group because of COVID, but we do group where we talk about the different subjects like guilt and anger and, how to build healthy relationships, etc. It's an open group. It's a psychoeducational group, 12 sessions long, and our clients really enjoy that. They learn a lot. We learn a lot about domestic violence and what our clients are going through. So when we can get back to that, we'll be definitely having the groups as well. But right now we do not have that. So a lot of the stuff right now is via telephone, and a lot of us are working from home. Some of us are working in the office or going back and forth at this moment. That is it.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the speakers. So now we will open it up to questions. Let me see. I know we had a couple come in. And I know also, while I'm trying to get the questions pulled up, there were a couple people who had raised their hand. And so if you have a question, if you were one of those raising your hand and you have a question, please put that question in the chat box and we'll get it answered. One of the questions was, do judges refer divorce cases with a history of violence or domestic violence to the Bexar County Dispute Resolution Center for mediation? If so, do the judges alert the Bexar County Dispute Resolution Center about the history?
You know, Jessica, having practiced so much in that area prior to being elevated to the bench, I don't ever recall a judge taking that into consideration. I think that's a very good question. I don't want to speak for the civil court judges, that they're a whole different group. I want to believe, knowing that the people that I know that sit on those benches, that is a consideration. But I believe that that question should probably be posed to them because they're the ones ordering those mediations.
Thank you. And B, I'm not sure when the question was, you asked the question, are these services only available for victims of domestic violence? Are you referring to the Justice Center services? Oh, family justice, yes. So
Yes, yes. We do service individuals who are dealing with domestic violence, family violence, human trafficking, that type of situation.
I have a question to kind of piggyback on B's question. What if a defendant, like one of the public defender's clients, is also like the defendant is accused of committing family violence, but what if they're a victim? Can we also send them to the Family Justice Center?
We take it person by person, and whatever services they're requesting, we go from there.
Okay, but there's no conflict, like say that if they're being prosecuted by the Bexar County District Attorney's Office, is there any sort of conflict?
That would pertain to the protective order unit. So from there, they would be informed if there was.
Okay, and if there is a conflict, where can we send our clients who might also be domestic violence victims?
We refer tremendously to Texas, to legal aid, to Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, and then family violence prevention services as well. They're handling family law cases at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think I caught all of those questions. Is there anything else? I know there was a lot of great information. There are a lot of shout outs to Dr. Speedling for the trauma. That was a lot of information in a short amount of time. So if there's anything, Dr. Speedling, that you want to add, I know you had to go through that pretty quickly. I'm hoping I'm not missing any questions. Was there anything else? I don't think I see it, but a great one-liner: trauma that is not transformed is transferred, which was very well said. That's pretty much, that's like captures the ACEs study in one sentence.
Yeah, it's hurt people, right? Until we stop the hurt. You know, the data, the science, and I have to thank Stacy for directing me in the areas to go look for this information, shows that you know, we can have a huge impact in our community if we address the problem early on at the root, if we address the trauma in the perpetrator. Because if we address the trauma in the perpetrator and look for behavioral modifications, tools and services for the defendant, then that defendant doesn't go on and create additional people who are at that end of their violence, whether that's another paramour, whether it's more children or grandchildren, because this can be for generations to come. If we can address that leak at the spigot of violent behavior, we won't have an ocean of victims to have to take care of down the stream that turns into a river that turns into a river. We can really make a huge impact at the spigot, at the leak, at the root of the violent behavior, and that is trauma.
So poetic.
Judge, I'm not going to attempt to follow that up, but I really good. I wanted to say, I wanted to give a wonderful book review, as Dr. Stacy Speedling mentioned, Vessel Vanderkolk and The Body Keeps the Score. Boy, if you ever want to read something that'll it's like a page turner. That's an incredible book. And so thank you, Dr. Speedling, for mentioning that.
And Gilbert, for our ADD audience, there is a video on my judge's Facebook page. It's a doctor from California, and I forget her name at the tip of my tongue right now, but she's one of the first videos you see, and it is a TED Talk. And she talks about the long-term effects of violence in a home, and that comes across as anxiety, depression. It comes across as diabetes, fibromyalgia, all sorts of physical manifestations. And I'm not one to be short of saying, for me, all of that will turn itself outward. It causes long-term, chronic, lethal, deadly diseases if it's not taken care of early on in a person's childhood, if they're traumatized at childhood.
In effect, it destroys the future.
Yes, it does.
And here's something that you all don't know, and I'll just leave you with this. San Antonio is a hotbed for medical research. The reason why is because 78207 has the highest level of diabetes per capita. There are big problems here with diabetes, with kidneys, with everything going on. We look at San Antonio from a medical research perspective, as where the rest of the country will be 20 years from now. We are sick. There is a reason for that. It all comes back to trauma. Just wanted to leave you all with that before you go to lunch and eat some cake.
Nailed it, Doc. Nailed it.
I'll go have a salad, honey.
Speedling just guilted everyone into kale for lunch.
Thank you. That's what I have every day for lunch, Jessica. Her guilt works on me.
Yeah, that's great. Oh yeah, so lots of activity going. Oh, one question. What is the status of Senate Bill
3529? It was passed the House unanimously. It was able to go from the Senate to the governor's desk. This was all in 2019. The governor signed it into law in June of 2019, and that is what created Reflejo Court in 13.
Yeah, Judge, they're asking about Senate Bill 343, which
I'm sorry.
That has to do with the TCIC.
Okay.
So for those of you who don't know what Senate Bill 343 is, that was filed by Senator Kolkhorst, and that was actually written by the Texas Council of Family Violence on Public Policy, which I'm a member of. So Senate Bill 343 essentially is looking at the TCIC, which is the law enforcement database. When you look at conditions of bond, or you look at protective orders, we currently have protective orders entered into the TCIC, which means when an officer responds to a family violence call, they can see that there's a presence of a protective order in that database. What is not in that database is the conditions of bond. So we are hoping, and the outcome right now is that Senate Bill 343 has been read by the Senate. It is now being sent to a committee. So once we start the hearings and the proceedings on that, our hope is that Senate Bill 343 will pass, which will enable not only those conditions of bond to be entered into the TCIC, where law enforcement can go to a home, see those conditions of bond, which gives them the ability to arrest the individual because they have violated a judge's order. The other thing that Senate Bill 343 will hopefully do is it will alert victims that a condition of bond was put in place, because you have individuals that you all are representing who do not know that conditions of bond exist against the perpetrator. So when that perpetrator starts stalking them at work, going to their home, they are unaware that that person is violating a judge's order. And if that knowledge existed, then we could fast track the likelihood of arresting for reoffensing, which is one of the biggest disparities in our legal system right now. Is a lot of victims are saying, he just comes over and he harasses me and nobody cares. And law enforcement comes and they don't do anything about it. Well, if law enforcement knew that the condition of bond existed, it gives them probable cause. It gives them an ability to make that arrest. So, you know, call your local senator. Please support 343. Shameless plug.
Thank you, Dr. Speedling.
And now y'all know who the smarter of the two of us is. You know, I can't get away from it.
That was the pretty one.
Well, we certainly didn't go wrong with this panel. We'll just say that. Very informative. Thank you all.